Tonight we're going to hear from the very persecuted and famous Kenyan journalist, Omwa, who is in front of us. I don't know terribly much about her. I went to her book launch on International Women's Day. And I also know that she was a very senior journalist for Nation Media, which is the main media outlet in Kenya. And they have the biggest building in Nairobi. And I believe Nation Media is owned by the Aga Khan. Over to you, Miss Omwa.
Thank you. And just to correct that, I did work for the Nation Media for a while, but by the time I left Kenya, I had worked with the Standard newspaper, which is the second largest newspaper, as the bureau chief in Mombasa.
Okay.
Yes. So I was asked, I'd like to thank you all for coming, members of Amnesty International Philadelphia chapter, to come and listen to my story and to give me this opportunity. I'm quite humbled to be speaking before you tonight. And I'm supposed to talk about human rights and the International Criminal Court. And when Susan asked me about the topic, I said I wanted to talk about a trail of injustice in pursuit of justice. First, I'd like to say that I'm here as a political asylee. I came here on February the 15th, 2013, and landed at the Dallas International Airport after I had been in a witness protection house for a year in Kenya. And why did I go into the witness protection house? I got a call from the International Criminal Court investigators wanting to talk to me about what had happened in the Kenyan post-election violence of 2007 and 2008, in which we had two presidential candidates, and neither of the candidates could accept the results. And the chairman of the Electoral Commission of Kenya, the late Samuel Kivuitu, was supposed to announce the results, and he said he did not know who had won the elections. And this was when the whole country was waiting for elections. He said he does not know who won the elections. So everybody, each side wanted to go over to State House and be president. So unlike the US, when people disagree during elections, just disagree verbally and say, oh, I didn't support Hillary or I didn't support President Trump. In Kenya, when people do not support a candidate, they fight physically. They go into war, they kill each other. And this is one of the curses of our Kenyan elections, because it's a matter of life and death. And why is it a matter of life and death? Because when someone gets into power, they're able to support their community, they're able to give them jobs, they're able to give them resources. So it's a real fight. So I was a bureau chief during the post-election violence. First, I covered the presidential campaigns, and then covered the elections, and we were there covering everything that happened. So I covered elections in Mombasa and Kisumu. People were hacking each other to death. People were killing each other. Neighbors who knew each other were hacking off each other's heads. They were raping women that they knew. They were killing their wives and kids just because they belonged to a different tribe or because they had supported the opposition or the incumbent president. The incumbent president then was Mwai Kibaki. And the opposition leader was called Raila Amolo Odinga. So 1,300 people were killed, that's according to police reports, and 650,000 people were displaced from their homes. That's more than 500,000 people whose homes were burned, their animals were burned, their cows were burned, their dogs were burned, they were burned in their houses. So a lot of them are refugees here and in other European countries. So because there was so much chaos and turmoil, the international community led by the US, I think then it was Condoleezza Rice, who was the Secretary of State, and Kofi Annan came to Kenya to intervene. And following subsequent actions, the whole thing ended up in the International Criminal Court in The Hague, in the Netherlands. So the reason why the International Criminal Court was calling me was because our president and vice president were being indicted for crimes against humanity and genocide. So briefly, on my way to meet the International Criminal Court investigators, whom I don't know who gave them my name, they said it was someone from the media, gave them my name and number, and told them I could help with the investigations. On my way to meet them, the government was surveilling on my phone because the government had been trying to ensure nobody went and witnessed against them. So witnesses were dying, witnesses were disappearing, journalists were disappearing. People who had said they were going to be witnesses were being shot on the street, shot in the chest 18 times and murdered. So according to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, 65 witnesses had disappeared. So when I was on my way to meet these people, strangers started following me, and that's what my book is about. Strange men started following me, men in unmarked cars, following me everywhere in the city, intimidating me. So I had to go on the run because they hacked my phone. All of a sudden, all the numbers in my phone disappeared after that call. My phone went blank. And all of a sudden, I could not access my computers and my email. Yeah. So they tried to abduct me twice. They tried to knock me down. So it was quite a chaotic moment. But I called the the Commission to Protect Journalists, who had a branch in Nairobi, and they have the head office in New York. Maria Salazar was then in charge. And the Committee to Protect Journalists and Kenya Committee to Protect Kenya Committee Agency that protects witnesses put me in a safe house for about a year. And it's after that I came to the US. So while in that safe house, that's when I wrote the book, because I thought I would die any time. So I wrote this book as if it was the last words that I would write on earth.
Wow.
I didn't have a lot of material. I didn't have a lot of pens, but whatever paper I found, whether it was a cardboard, whether it was a plastic bag, whatever it was, I kept writing because I wanted people to know what had happened to me. So this book was not about celebrity and being famous and making millions. It was about telling the truth about what had happened and the injustices that had happened in the pursuit of justice. So a lot of the times when we, as people fighting for human rights and people on Human Rights Watch, when we're trying to procure witnesses and when they're trying to get people to help out, they tend to get so consumed by getting that information out and procuring witnesses that they forget in the process the danger that they put witnesses through. They forget in the process that it's not just about the end result, but it's about the traumatic distress, the post-traumatic distress disorder, and the losses that a witness has to go through. So I was not told that I was going to be called by the International Criminal Court. But the human rights people or the people who are helping to procure witnesses knew, and they gave our names. They should have at least let us know. It was important to let me know that you're going to be called by the International Criminal Court, and you're being called in relation to people who are very high in power. So we need to protect you before this call comes. You see. So their motive may not have been to expose me to danger, but they did expose me to danger. And what happened was that now I was on my own because I couldn't reach anybody. I was kept in a safe house. I couldn't reach the International Criminal Court and ask them what to do. I tried to run to one of the embassies. They said, no, you have to wait for 3 days. We have to confirm that you're a real witness. You're not fake. We're going to arrest you because there's nothing to show that you're a witness. So the trail of injustices that sometimes happen when we are trying to get justice just means that we need at times to go to back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, we really want to help these people. We really want justice to be done. But in the process of procuring this justice, what measures do we take to ensure that everybody is safe in the process? So my president and vice president were indicted, but they were acquitted on a mistrial because most of the witnesses had been killed. And some of the journalists who were supposed to be witnesses have never been traced up to date.
Right.
And what's happened to some of the people who wanted to be witnesses, and what I feared most would happen to me, was that my body would be found in a forest, because what the government of Kenya does when you are a dissenting voice is to ensure that they abduct you and take you to a forest for wild animals to eat you up so that your body is never found. So that was my greatest fear, that I would not be found, or parts of my body would be found, and that my parents or my family would never find me and bury me until they could have closure. That was my biggest fear. And my second biggest fear was that I would be shot 18 times on the chest like they did to Mr. Maina Diambo, who was a witness. He was under witness protection, but somehow they shot him. And the government managed to follow witnesses who had been hidden in Uganda, and Tanzania and killed them. And they even followed witnesses who had been relocated to the Netherlands, tried to kill them, but they were found before they got rid of them. Because they went with different names and different papers. And in those other countries, you have to have a credit card and a state ID. You can't just move around like that. Yeah, so it's unfortunate that the people got away with it. So I've passed around a paper to you called How to Get Away with Murder in Kenya. You might read it in your own time. You might not get time to read it today. But it just shows what happened, how people committed crimes. Can you believe, would that happen here, that 1,500 people can be murdered and nobody, not even one person has been charged today or been jailed for it? Can you believe that that can happen here, that 500,000 people can be displaced and nobody has been charged or tried up to date? So that is an injustice, that is a trail of injustice. And what makes people, what makes the Kenyan people, what makes our community vote in the same people back to power again and again? And yet these are the same people who killed your family. So another trail of injustice was that a lot of women were raped. A lot of women were raped in the presence of their kids. A lot of girls and young children were raped in the presence of their parents. A lot of men and boys were sodomized by the army. But when later, after all this calmed down a little and the women went to report to the police station that they had been raped, they found that the policemen right behind the counter who they were reporting to were the same policemen who had raped them. So where do these people go? So where's justice in all this? Yeah. When I went to report to the Kilimani police station, I was taken by the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and I really am grateful to them because they were really a part of my journey. When they took me to report my case to the police station, the police said he could not append his signature to my statement because he didn't want to be involved. So all he was telling me was, my children are very young, I want to take them through school, I can't append my name to your signature because the government will kill me. I don't want to die now because my children still have to go to school. But what about me? Because I needed that statement to ensure that I'd recorded what had happened for me to go through the next process of the asylum. So there's a lot of injustices that happen because of fear. And fear is such a strong factor in injustice. Because if you fear your own government and you fear your own policemen, and these are the people who are supposed to protect you, then what happens to you? Yeah. So the people vote not because they like the leaders, but because they're intimidated, because they're afraid, because they have no other solution. I wish that we as journalists would find a way to put the power back into the people so that they have the confidence to vote for the right person. But the trail of injustice continues because Kenya just had 2 elections that were repeated. The Supreme Court cancelled, some of you may have heard about it, the Supreme Court cancelled the first election. Right. And then when they went back for the second election, there was not even a quorum. The Supreme Court could not have a quorum. They were afraid because one of the judges' drivers was shot. So the judges were afraid to come to court. So that is a trail of injustice. So with 2 presidential elections, even if you vote, how do you vote when the IEBC, the electoral body, has said this environment is not conducive for elections? Yeah. So even if the people vote, someone's going to steal the elections. So what is the purpose of voting? I don't have answers to these questions, but I do believe that as journalists, we are the voice of society. I do believe as human rights, we have to have our voices out there. We must continue, we must repeat it that justice must be done and power must be given to the people. At this time, I did mention some people in my book, just to close, so we have time for questions. I did mention some people in my book, and they're quite now, the backlash is coming back because they did not want to be mentioned. So they're like, why did you mention me? Why did you say I gave your name to the International Criminal Court? This is a lie. I never said it. But as human rights people, we are like the voice of the society. We are the conscience of the society. We are the integrity of the society. If we make mistakes, we should be able to say, I'm sorry, my intention was good, but mistakes happened. We made mistakes. I'm sorry I put you in this kind of trouble. I didn't know you'd go through all this. Because I ended up living in buses. I ended up living in bathrooms. I ended up living in a bus for a whole week, traveling from one part of a country to another. I did not have my medication. because somebody just changed my life in the twinkle of an eye. So we need to be accountable, and we must not allow, and I'm going to continue talking because I'll not allow someone to stifle my voice because of a mistake that they made. The book is not meant to be a revenge, but it's a book that is meant to bring out what we can do better. So I'm here, I'm a political asylee. I was an investigative journalist, but I cannot work as an investigative journalist because I'm a guest of the state. So I'm not a refugee, I'm not an immigrant, I'm a political asylee, I'm a guest of the government. And when someone comes to your house and you give them free accommodation, you can't start saying, oh, the food is bad, oh, they fought with the wife. Like, you can't say anything about them because they'll throw you out. Yeah, so I have that challenge, but I will not stop writing. So whatever I cannot put out there, I will put in the book, and I will write, because the power of the words can never be underestimated. Thank you.
Yeah.
Plenty of time for questions.
I was in Kenya in August 2008, so that was like 7 months after I suppose about 6 months after it all stopped. I saw a refugee camp, and I remember talking to someone in Kenyatta Hospital who was, I can't remember, was he a nurse or a social worker? But he was telling me that when it was really bad, they couldn't let their staff go home because they'd be killed, it was just a terrible time.
Yeah. So even in our office as journalists, I worked up country in Mombasa, and they call us people from up country. So Kenya has 43 tribes. When I left Kenya, it had 43 tribes. I think now it might have 45 because they added the Asian tribe and a second tribe. But the tribe is so bad in Kenya, it's like the race thing here. Just saying your name can cost you death. Yeah. So there are tribes that are bigger than others, so they have the voting power. Like you might just have Republicans and Democrats. But we have Kikuyus and Luos and Kambas, and they vote in blocks. So if you are a Kikuyu, then a person from a Luo community will not vote you. But if they vote you, they'll vote you in secretly because the other Luos might kill you. You see, because it's about us and our people. What is in it for us? It's our turn to eat. I think Michelle Arong wrote a book like that. It's our turn to eat. Yeah, so we had some Kikuyu journalists in the office, and me as bureau chief, I had to hide them because people wanted to kill them. So they could not go out and write stories. They could not cover what was going on. Instead, we were taking time hiding them and sneaking them out of the city. And then a lot of people had to move to the IDP camps. This was the camp that was set up for those who had been displaced from their homes. But what I was fighting about all my media life was corruption. And this corruption found its way into the refugee camps. So the money that was supposed to be distributed for these people to have them resettle them or have them start a new life were being taken by the people who were supposed to be protecting them.
Right.
Yeah. So up to now, some people have never gone back to their homes. It's just the greed. It's the greed of the leaders. It's the greed of the people in power that cannot allow, us to just act decently and give people what's due for them. You have a mother who's lost her 8 children, and she has no home, and you take her money. What does that show you? It shows that the conscience of the society is dead. Yeah. So one thing I keep saying that made me really be an activist was the 40 women and children who had sought help in church, and they were killed. 40 women and children. You know that a church, a temple, a mosque is a sacred place, it's a sanctuary. And the international laws, the Geneva Convention says that when you move into a sanctuary, into a safe space, nobody should follow you in there. But 40 women and children who are running away from the Kenyan post-election violence were burnt to ashes. And there was this little girl, a 2-month-old baby. The mother threw her out through the window because the fire was too much. And this same youth who had been paid by the leaders took the child and threw it right back into the fire, and the child died. And up to now, nobody has been charged for these offenses. So as an international community, are we going to let this continue happening? Are we going to let them get away with it? Because they already got away with it at the International Criminal Court because they got rid of all the witnesses. So it's a pathetic situation, but we must not give up hope. We have to keep talking. Nobody should stifle our voices.
Are these refugee camps run by the United Nations?
Yes, they're run by the United Nations, but partly by the government.
Uh-huh.
So the United Nations give the government money
Oh,
because
I see.
they're the people on the ground. But instead, they use the money to buy big cars, to add their other wives, have more children, and just feel rich, build houses. And these people have continued living in the camps in pathetic situations. The kids don't go to school.
Where is the refugee camp located?
They're located, where was yours?
I am, oh gosh.
They're located in different parts
Yeah.
of
They're
the
multiple-
country.
multiple-
It was in the
multiple
country.
parts of the country.
It was,
And then, there was one in
Yeah.
Naivasha,
yeah.
there was one in Impala Club in Nairobi, there was one in Mombasa, and then there was one in Kisumu at the post office. Now, the corruption that happened was the UN and the other bodies gave the government 400,000 Kenya shillings, divide that by 100, so many dollars. Everybody was to get 400,000 Kenyan shillings. But they decided to divide the people who were suffering into groups. So those who are from their tribes got the 400,000, but those who are from other tribes who did not vote for them got $10,000. And that's why you keep having war, because it is an injustice that you see that's openly, happening. If we were given money for this room and everybody was to get $400,000 and I decide that, I'm going to pick 4 black or 3 black, 4, 5 black people in the room and give them 400,000 and then give all the white people 10,000 because they don't come from my tribe. Like, who does that? But it happened in Kenya. So it's a system that has continued over the years, and I don't know how it's going to be dismantled, but I haven't lost hope. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not too knowledgeable about Kenya, but I would like to know how long has this bad political repression and corruption been going on? Like, let's say, how many decades do you think?
Wow, so we've only been independent since 1964. We are a very young nation. America's been independent for over 200 years. We've only been independent for 50 years. But unlike America that has a history of slave trade, and unlike the Jews who have a history of the Holocaust, we have a history from the British of colonialism, where they colonized us for quite a number of years, from the 1800s. We had a British queen, the Queen of England was our queen, and they gave us English names. So they asked us to drop all our traditional names, and they came and took over the best parts of the country and settled there and turned people into, turned people into squatters.
Into
Squatters. Squatters are people who work for you in their own land.
And
take their land, yeah.
and indentured servants,
Yes,
essentially.
yeah. They make you your servant. Someone comes into your home, takes over your home and turns you into a servant, so you don't own
Right.
anything. Yeah, so that British colonial system was terrible for the country because it brainwashed people. And it divided people, so that that's where the divide and rule came up, because either you were with the British or you were considered a traitor. So the people, a lot of the men in certain communities went to jail, and only the women remained. And when the men came back from jail during independence, they found the women were too independent and they had new children, fresh children who were not their own children. So that dysfunction of families and systems was completely broken down. And because of that divide and rule, that's why the political situation continues along those lines. So people can never be united.
And they had the airlift, where they picked some Kenyans to give them everything, education,
Yes.
everything.
Yeah, so they
Yeah,
had
the
airlift
airlift
where
people.
they picked
Yeah.
particular individuals from a certain community were taken to Britain or to America and trained, and when they came back, they became the leaders. Yet those who had fought for independence were forgotten.
Were there preferred tribes? Did the English like one tribe
Yeah,
over
because
another?
yes, the English settled in the best part of the area with the best. You hear about Kenyan safari with the elephants and the beautiful animals and the great landscape. That's where the Kikuyus and the Kalenjins lived, in the Rift Valley and the Central Province. So that's where the mean colonization took place, and that's where commercialization took place, and they got to kind of abandon their culture and become very materialistic. So that's where capitalism grew. But the other areas that were not yet adulterated remained very poor. Yeah.
It's disgusting.
We're so honored that you're here to speak. What other forums are you able to write or speak at here in the United States or wherever you are in the States?
So far it has been a little difficult. First, because when I came here, I was asked not to speak because I'm not allowed to be an activist or an advocate according to Homeland Security and USCIS. So I've not been able to go out openly, but I just realized that I can still tell my story without doing investigative pieces on America. So I can still go out to forums. So I've been covered by the Washington Post. I'm online. They came from New York and covered me. I've been covered by ABC News. I've been given the same story. I've been going out to speak in churches and universities. I've been asked to speak at the, what is it called, 1199C, the union. I talk to students and encourage them. They have a health fair every year. I talk to them and encourage them that despite dropping out from school or pregnancy or recovery from drugs and alcohol abuse and domestic abuse, you can rise from the ashes and start life again. Because I came from Africa. I have a job now as a health educator with a health community center in Center City, but that hasn't stopped me from doing whatever I want to do. So I do that for a living, but I also do my writing. So whatever forum you can invite me to, I just got invited. I spoke to Amnesty International. I'll be going to speak at the UN convention soon. So I'm beginning to get different visits. I'm going to be speaking at the Urban League Women's Conference in April. I've been invited by the City Council woman, Blondell Reynolds Brown. Yeah, so I'm just starting.
She was
Yes.
invited by Blondell Reynolds Brown.
Yes.
I used to work for her.
Oh, she was a key speaker at my book launch.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so she's trying to help my book move. Yeah, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I just won't allow my voice to be stifled because I have a story to tell and I want to share it.
You see, what's interesting to me is having been to Nigeria and then Kenya, which of course is like 5,000 miles on a different coast, and the West Africa, the slave trade all came from West Africa, but so yeah, it's a very different story from West Africa than from East Africa.
Yes.
And when the British left West Africa, they just pulled down the flag and they just put up the Nigerian flag and said, okay, that's it. But when the British left Kenya, I mean, there was a bloody war, genocide, all sorts of problems. So it's a very different situation.
It is, but again, when the British left, they never really left. Because
Right.
they left their cronies.
Yeah,
They left people they had trained to speak the Queen's English.
right.
And then some of the leaders were very close friends and did business with the Queen's family. They shared attorneys. Like when our president was, he was not president then, but he was a presidential candidate. When he was being tried by the International Criminal Court, one of his lawyers was the Queen's lawyer in England. So they kept the connections all along.
Well, who was that big landowner, Lord something or other, and he shot people on his land and he's yes, you know who I
I
mean.
can't remember his, Lord Delamere.
Delamere.
Yes.
I mean, one thing that really shocked me when I went to Kenya was that there were all this land that belonged to colonizers. They hadn't left. You don't see that in Nigeria.
There's no land reform at all?
No, but even the president's family, the president died and now his son is the president.
Kenya.
He owns almost the whole of Coast Province. And
The
most
whole
of a Coast Province is like the president owning the whole of Philadelphia. You know, and then all of you here have to be squatters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why the war can never stop, because people know that their ancestral parents left them land. And an ancestral land is community land. You can't own it. But people came, the government gave people title deeds for other people's land. Yeah.
Is there any role of corporations, international corporations or anything?
Yes, we do. We do have that, but it hasn't kind of worked. It has worked in some areas, but it hasn't worked everywhere. But we do have, Kenya has one of the highest non-profit organizations that is supposed to, we have human rights bodies, we have Center for Policy and Development, we have all these non-profits. But a lot of the non-profits have only benefited the staff members. They really haven't benefited the people.